matter. But why is it interesting for us? It's actually considered as carbon neutral. So basically, the idea is that during the lifetime of the biomass, it absorbs the CO2, and when it's combusted, also it releases it again. But this is considered as a neutral process in a given time frame. There are, of course, dozens of different types of biomass. Just to list here a few. Probably the most common used, especially in the cement industry, is are rice husks, but as well coffee husks are widely used, coconut shells, bagasse, cashew nut husks, wood waste, etc., etc. As well, municipal solid waste and as well sewage sludge actually has some biogenic content in it, and this could be considered and is partly as well considered as biomass, but this will not be part of the presentation and the discussion that we are having in here now. Now, what is the problem? I mean, the traditional biomass waste treatment, at least here in Asia, is what you see here on the picture. It's actually open burning, and of course, as you can imagine, that basically releases all the emissions unfiltered to the air. And the air quality in Asia is not really amongst the best in the world, frankly, and in fact, actually, in Asia we have the cities with the highest polluted air worldwide. And of course, there are many reasons for this air pollution. But definitely this open burning of biomass waste contributes as well to the air pollution. Here just some numbers from the Stockholm Convention on POPs. So you see, especially if we are talking about biomass which has some, let's say, which is impacted, for example, treated with some pesticides, herbicides beforehand, it really can have an quite high level of dioxin and furan emissions, especially if the burning conditions are not so good, if it's wet, etc., temperatures are not high, etc. You can see that it really has a huge impact on the air. Now, co-processing, of course, is one of the better technologies to treat biomass waste. Very important as well. I would like to briefly just state again what is the definition of it. So it's basically a simultaneous recovery of energy and as well recycling of the materials contained in pre-processed alternative fuels and raw materials. And this is done in energy-intensive industries and predominantly actually in cement. So we have a few characteristics in our processes that really are supportive for waste treatment. We have the high temperatures, we have the long residence time, we have the alkaline environment, etc. And last but not least as well, we are having the advantages that there are no ashes, no ash residues generated. So everything is actually fully incorporated into the final product. So, of course, the potential for alternative fuels and raw materials is big. There are different types of wastes that can be used. We heard municipal solid waste a few times this morning already. We heard about plastic waste in the presentation from Karel yesterday. Then we're talking about hazardous waste, we're talking about non-hazardous industrial waste, construction demolition waste, and a big chunk actually in terms of volume which is available is agricultural waste and residues. And as already mentioned, this can be husks from rice, from soya, these are woods, seeds, bagasse, etc. So to give you a little bit a flavor about, let's say, and some rules of thumb in terms of volume generation for the different types of waste. And of course, I mean, this is not written in stone, but to give you a rule of thumb. So for rice husk, about 20% of the paddy is actually, rice husk. So we are talking about 0.2 to 2 tons per hectare of rice that is generated in terms of rice husk. As well, when we're looking, for example, into coffee husk, to produce 1 ton of coffee coffee, 1 ton of coffee husks is generated. So you see, this is really significant amounts of waste which are generated in there. That's one point I would like to highlight in this slide. The second point is when you look at the major generators in terms of countries, you see many Asian countries are very strong, for example, in rice plantation, in coffee plantation, etc. So especially as well here in the Asian context, there is a lot of volume which is actually out there. So what are a few benefits of co-processing this biomass residues? First of all, of course, the calorific value, which is still present in the rice husk. So it helps us to substitute fossil fuels. We need less coal, for example, and this can have a potential cost benefit. We will talk a little bit about the costs later on. Furthermore, if you take the example of rice husk, it has a relatively rich silica content, so it can actually as well improve the raw mix and the quality of it. I mentioned before it's considered as CO2 neutral, and this is really of high significance, especially in regulated markets. We have heard before in Europe, in the ETS, the CO2 costs have been reaching 40-50 euro per ton already. Of course, that gives a big booster into carbon neutral AFRs. I mentioned already it helps to, it's a complete energy and material recovery, and it has a relative high energy efficiency, especially if you compare this with boilers or with biomass power plants that we are having in here. And last but not least, I think it really addresses a huge environmental issue in terms of air quality. So it really addresses the issue of stubble burning. And I mean, this is just one example in North India, where there is still a big issue today. In many other countries, actually, there are some regulations in place that are prohibiting this. Just an example as well, Lafarge Philippines, due to a professionalization of the supply chain, they actually achieved about 30% TSR, mainly with rice husks. So you see as well, this can be really a significant contributor as well to the AFR and to the thermal energy contributor of one organization. Now, this all sounds great. So you would ask, so what are maybe the barriers? Why is it not even more used in the cement production? So first and foremost, I think it's as well related to quality requirements. And especially when we are talking about big volumes, when we're really increasing the thermal substitution rates with high volumes of biomass, of course, the quality gets more important in terms of moisture, size, but then in general, in terms of limited fluctuation as much as possible. Then very often the biomass is linked to seasonality, harvest season, etc. So the availability is not always there. Huh? And sometimes you need big storage capacities then as well to maybe bridge the low harvest season. And of course, storing biomass can have as well an impact on the quality. It potentially can increase moisture if you have to store it outside, etc., etc. Then competition. I mean, this is something which is definitely increasing as well in this context of carbon neutrality, where many industries, many countries actually are going for this carbon neutral target. Competition will increase, and competition will be with waste to energy plants, will be with boilers, will be even with private usage of part of this material. Investments, I don't think you need major investments if you go for biomass waste as an alternative fuel and raw material. Nevertheless, it needs some. I think what is more critical is probably a bit the costs, and the costs are mainly linked to logistics cost, collection of it, a little bit to preparation and handling, but much less, I would say, compared to other alternative fuels and raw materials. Energy efficiency, it has a lower energy efficiency compared to, let's say, traditional fossil fuels. That's maybe one of the barrier. And then another one is definitely the regulatory framework. Of course, a country legislation can maybe support co-processing directly to say, well, there's some framework in place who is supporting the usage of biomass waste in as an AFR, or it can have an indirect impact if, for example, there are some laws that are prohibiting open burning, as I mentioned before. That will definitely push then as well a little bit this biomass waste to the AFR and to the cement plant. So very briefly, just to give you some ideas on the usage of biomass fuels in the cement industry. This data is from a report by IFC in 2017. So here you see some of the major cement players that you're having in there, and then you see, let's say, what are the different percentages of the AFR portfolio that they're using. So just as an example, in Holcim, 9% of the AFR portfolio was agricultural waste, and you had 15% wood chips, other biomass, 2% meat, bone meal, impregnated sawdust, 6%, and about 68% were other alternative fuels and raw materials. But nevertheless, you see it can go up to 35% of a company's AFR portfolio can actually be biomass waste. And as such, if you combine all these big multinationals plus the smaller companies, etc., you see that around 30 million tons of biomass waste are used in the world per year by the cement companies. Now, again, why is this so interesting in the context of the low carbon future or zero carbon neutrality targets? Here, basically, some very basic calculation based on the fact that we are using the calorific value of the different biomass waste. Again, an average, of course, depends on various characteristics, but in average. And then we are assuming as well an average calorific value of the coal. And then we basically see if we are replacing 1 ton of coal with 1 ton of rice husk. Basically, we can reduce the CO2 by around 1.37 tons. So, of course, if you then really scale this up and increase the usage of biomass and carbon neutral fuel, then definitely this will have a big impact as well when we're talking about 1 year's operation of a cement plant. Now I would like to very briefly give you a quick snapshot on a case study here in Vietnam. This is our beautiful Hong Chong plant in the south of Vietnam. So basically here, what is quite interesting, I mean, the volumes of biomass, and we are mainly using rice husk, has been reduced quite significantly over the years. So in 2013, to give you a flavor, we used close to 50,000 tons of rice husk in a year. In 2018, this has been cut half, so close to 25,000 tons. The last 2 years we increased again a little bit, but one of the issues really the increased cost per ton, and then as well the less financial attractiveness compared to coal that we are having in there. So today we are basically not feeding rice husk per se, just as such, as an alternative fuel. We are still using rice husk, but this is mainly to blend it with our hazardous waste in order to reduce the moisture and as well to increase the handle, to make it more handle and easier to handle at the plant. So you see, I gave some indications in terms of cost. Of course, this varies from year to year, even month to month. So you see cost of coal for us here is around 3.5 to 4.3 US dollar per gigajoule. And you see the cost of rice 3 to around 5 US dollar per gigajoule. So you already see there if the coal is relatively cheap, and if the rice husk is relatively expensive, then it doesn't make sense for us from a financial point of view to use rice husk anymore. So as a conclusion, basically plant-based biomass is considered as carbon neutral, and as such it can really play an important role in carbon neutral strategies. Of course, it will have less impact than, let's say, these new technologies that we have heard beforehand, but it could be a win-win solution, especially short term. Furthermore, of course, it definitely saves as well fossil fuels, coal. Then co-processing of biomass in the cement kilns has a big advantage. It really leads to complete energy and material recovery. It is as well considered as more energy efficient compared to, for example, biomass power plants. And a big advantage, I still believe, from co-processing is that there is no residue generation out of this. I don't see the challenges on the technical solutions. I mean, this is not something very, very difficult to handle, to pre-treat, to dose, to feed, etc. But I think the biggest barriers are really in a cost-efficient, let's say, delivery, transportation of the material to the cement plants. And then, of course, as well to make sure that this is, as well in terms of quality, something which is suitable and sustainable over time. Last but not least, I mean, I didn't really talk about this, but very clear, of course, there's often this discussion about biomass production for fuel or for versus food supply, or let's say use the land for the community, etc. Of course, it's very clear that there should not be a competition, and I firmly believe that, you know, with all these biomass residues that we have been talking about, be it rice husk, be it coffee husk, etc., there's plenty of biomass out there that can be used as an alternative fuel in the cement production. Very briefly, just to introduce as well the authors of this paper and the ones who contributed to this presentation as well. So Kare Carstensen from cemtech, you heard a presentation from him yesterday, as well his colleague Palash Kumar. He is as well working for cemtech, has a lot of experience as well in geocycle, and then myself. So I'm very happy if you have any questions, drop me an email in there. And last but not least, I think I would like as well to close with one very important statement for me and for our company. I mean, we are all doing this because tomorrow matters. And I think it has been mentioned by the other panelists already, we are really in a very critical time, but I believe this is as well a unique chance that we are having as a cement industry, and as well as the experts in here, to shape as well this tomorrow. So thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bruno, for a very clear presentation that really sets out the case for biomass, and you've given us lots of really useful data that people will be able to go back to it and see if it's a potential fuel for their own cement facilities. It's clearly a complicated thing, because you know, there are lots of different fuel types to be considered, and we've been talking about municipal solid waste, and tomorrow we'll be talking about tire chips. Biomass is just one of the whole portfolio. Do you have other fuels that you're burning in your plants at the moment outside of biomass?
Yes, definitely. I mean, biomass for us is not really a target fuel, to be honest. We are treating a lot of non-hazardous industrial waste, especially from multinational companies in here, and then we are treating as well quite a large amount of hazardous waste, sludges. This can be oil contaminated rags, etc., etc. And in Vietnam, we are actually the only company who's having the license to treat PCB contaminated oil. So that's as well something we are doing on a regular basis. So we are having quite a wide AFR portfolio, and biomass waste at the moment is really just more as a supporting to treat the hazardous material. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've actually really highlighted actually how difficult it is to use. It's seasonal, and then there's the I guess the energy density of it. You know, if it's been transported a long way and it's taking a lot of volume, it becomes hard to handle. So you have to be very prepared for all of those eventualities. Is there competition? There's competition, I guess, from other sectors for biomass.
Yes, definitely there is. I mean, we see as well, especially here in Vietnam, more and more, let's say, biomass-powered electricity generators. So that's something which is coming up more. But then simply the usage of it in some industrial boilers, etc. So I think from that perspective, there is definitely more competition. What I believe is if a cement company is really sees this as a strategic, let's say, source, I think then you will really have to look at the whole value chain. Huh? So you should not be just at the end of it and say, okay, I'm buying this and that. I think you should look really into how can you go further into the value chain. How can you be part of it? Be it in logistics, but even further in the biomass generation itself. I think there are a few case studies from other companies in here that show how this can be done. Yeah.
And I guess as the price of carbon becomes more universal, that will change the economics of it. So there may be a time when it becomes much more attractive if there is a carbon price, but maybe that's some way off in Vietnam at the moment.
Yes, I think here we are lacking a little bit behind to Europe or North America. I mean, we don't have any emission trading system in place. There's no carbon tax yet. But it's clear this will come, and I mean, we as a company, as a leader of the industry, we are not waiting for this carbon tax. Especially, I believe that reducing the, let's say, carbon emissions, or let's say the specific carbon emissions, by reducing the clinker factor, by increasing the alternative fuels usage, makes business sense. So already today,
Sure.
there's a reason to do that. Yeah.
And also, I mean, you need to be ready. So understanding how biomass fuels can play a role in your fuel strategy is part of your preparation. And maybe the situation changes and you'll be able to react to it in a timely manner.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much, Bruno, from Vietnam, calling in from Vietnam. We are really delighted to have had you with us today. And thank you to all the speakers for their presentations. I think it's been a fantastic couple of hours. We've covered a huge amount of ground. Thanks to KHD, Sinoma, ThyssenKrupp and INSEE. We greatly appreciate your time, your efforts, and sharing all your expertise. That's all we have for today. The time we have for today. Tomorrow we'll be back with more low carbon cement technologies. We'll be looking at waste heat recovery systems, refractories, fuel flexibility, and we'll be showing a study on tire chips as an alternative fuel. So plenty of good things to come tomorrow. If you're registered for our event, you'll receive the reminders for that session. Just a quick word to say that in September, we'll be returning with another 4-day conference, Decarbonising Cement Industry, taking on many of the themes that we're